Hey everyone, welcome back to another show here on the Lizzie Ens Show. Today, I have a very dear friend of mine here on, and we're going to talk about etiquette today. Her name is Alison Cheperdak. I've been waiting for this conversation for quite some time now because I've been watching you online and I just love your stuff. So it's very interesting to me because clearly where I grew up in the Amish community and etiquette was not something that was part of my lifestyle, but it's something that I really, really appreciate. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and see what we can bring to the audience about etiquette. So Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, I've been a longtime fan of your work as well. To meet you here and to be able to have this conversation is a lot of fun, and I'm grateful to be included.
Yes, absolutely. So walk us back to like where did this all start for you with etiquette?
So my husband and I, we were engaged to be married, and I was 22. I grew up in New England where it's not super normal to get married very young like that. And I hadn't really been to many weddings. I was the oldest grandchild on one side of the family. And so I had all these wedding etiquette questions. So my mom was like, maybe you get an etiquette book to just look up the answers. And I did that thinking that I would just flip to the pages that I needed to get the answers that I was looking for. And then I found myself reading that first book cover to cover and then reading countless books on etiquette and social emotional intelligence and all of these sorts of things like soft skills. And I
Mhm.
found it really helpful for me. At the time, I was working as a television news reporter and an anchor. And then I went to law school and I was working at a large law firm. I worked in governments for some time. I worked at a nonprofit. And all throughout, I was realizing that there's all these little things that really aren't that little. We're talking about relationships and being professional, being kind, being respected, being respectful. I started posting on social media about 2.5 years ago, and things picked up pretty quickly. I try to share things in a way that's really affirming and positive and almost like I'm like a secret weapon in your back pocket. I
Yeah.
never want people to feel badly when I'm suggesting something that's maybe different from something that they're accustomed to doing before.
I love that. What would you say to someone that is like not even really interested? Like they're like, no, I live my life just the way that I like it. What would you say to someone like that that just doesn't really care about etiquette?
Great question. So I would say two things. First, I would say that etiquette is all about kindness, consideration, respect, and integrity. So it's
Mhm.
not about knowing what fork to use at a really fancy meal, and it's not about showing off. It's not about making others feel less than. There are norms and customs that we follow in order to create a more civil experience, but etiquette at its core is all about kindness and about having both self respect and respect for others. And so, if those things are not important to you, I would question your values, perhaps. So, that's number one. And then number two is that it's a big misconception that etiquette only applies in really formal scenarios
Yeah.
or that it only applies in situations that are fancy or expensive when that's not the case. What's appropriate in one situation would be not appropriate in another. Like an analogy I like to use is like if you're going to the Super Bowl, the way that you would behave as a member of the audience would be different than a golf tournament or a Taylor Swift concert. The way you dress and the way you react in the crowd would be different than the National Symphony Orchestra. One is not better than the other, it's just different.
I love that so much. I had a conversation with someone the other day about personalities and being who you are. And the conversation came up with different personality books that you can read and like learning what your personality type is. But I said one of the things that really stands out to me is I never find myself fitting in a specific box. And one of those reasons is because I feel it's important, and you can correct me on this, but it's kind of what you were saying is like whatever the event is, be who you need to be at that event or party or whoever you're with, be who you need to be there. You're not necessarily changing who you are, but you're aware of your surroundings and where you're at. Is that accurate?
That's so well said. So well said. And so you're being your authentic self, but you're being respectful according to the situation that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a question for you. We talked briefly about this before, but I work in the health and wellness industry, and something that there's lots of harsh things in this industry, and especially with people saying things, judgment, and all of that. So, what would you say to, let's say there's a client of mine or someone that is a friend of mine and they're receiving a lot of harsh judgment from either friends or family, whoever it is, maybe they're commenting on their weight or they're telling them like what you're doing isn't correct. What would you say something like that, a response would be that falls in the etiquette category?
Sure. So, other people's opinions on your weight or your physicality are none of your business. And I would say something like, I appreciate you caring, and it depends on how it's received. Like, if
Yeah.
someone really cares about you, you might respond with more gentleness. But
Mhm.
in general, you could say something like, I really appreciate you caring. I want you to know that I'm taking care of myself and I have a medical team that's focused on this. Or like, my weight is something that I talk to my doctor and my nutritionist about. It's not something that I want to discuss at the dinner table tonight.
Yeah.
Or you can say things like, I'd appreciate if you didn't comment on what I'm eating, or I'd appreciate if you didn't make comments on my food choices, things like that. And I think food is such a tough one. Weight is such a tough one. It's really not appropriate to make jokes. People do it all the time, but saying like, oh, wow, you must be hungry, or that's all you're eating, or I wish I had your discipline, or comments about metabolism, or all kinds of things. You really don't know what someone is experiencing. Like, just because someone looks a certain way, you have no idea what's going on in their mind and what their relationship is with their body or with food. So that's number one. And then also, if you're with someone for one meal or one party, that's not giving you the big picture of their health status
Yeah.
and what it looks like on, the full course of a day or a week or anything like that. So I would tread really lightly with both critical and complimentary comments about what someone looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that innately, a lot of human beings want to react with some kind of defense mechanism. It's like, I need to protect myself or stand up for myself. A long, long time, I was a perpetual people pleaser. Like, I wouldn't, create that boundary with how other people were speaking to me. And I would just try to please everybody. And in the recent years, I've learned how to not do that and how to like have those boundaries in place in a respectful way and
Mhm.
just be okay with what their response is. I did find out though that most people respect you more when you
Mhm.
have those boundaries in place. And it's not, for me, the way that I see it is not necessarily, you're not being rude with it. You're just understanding where your value is
Yes.
and what you need to protect yourself from.
Definitely. And sometimes people make comments and they have no idea that they're inappropriate or no idea how they would be received, or they use certain words and they think it's complimentary, but you don't receive it that way. So the outcome of having good etiquette may be that people are pleased with you, but that is never the goal, because trying to please everyone is confusing and
Yeah.
impossible.
You don't have your own voice if you're doing that.
Mhm.
You lose your voice with everybody else, and what ends up happening is they're controlling you, and you're not in control of your own environment and your own self. It's really interesting. I didn't even know how to look someone in the eyes to have a conversation, a one-on-one conversation. Like, I get emotional thinking about that, but I remember early on after I left the Amish community, I would be in conversation with people and I could not look these people in the eyes to have conversation. I would be looking off to the side to be talking to them because I didn't know how. It was uncomfortable for me, very uncomfortable.
And was it something that you would do among your family and your close friends? Was it more like strangers that were difficult to make eye contact with?
Now that I think about it, it was probably more strangers than family. But then again, like even in the family, like I think it was also just normal to not, we didn't have any kind of like affection. Like we weren't allowed to give each other hugs. We didn't say, I love you. So none of that was part of our community. And so I feel like it was like this whole overhaul that kind of needed to happen and that takes time. When I really think about it though, I feel like some people are just more driven with an interest with this stuff. Would
Yes,
would you say that?
definitely. So my clients really run the gamut, but oftentimes it's people that are very self-aware
Mm,
and they can read the room and they're aware of all of these social nuances. They're asking questions that I really like, titrating kinds of questions. And then there are times where I have clients that going through a lot of social anxiety and they feel like they can't go to a job interview and they don't know how to talk about themselves. So there's the spectrum, but oftentimes the people who are interested in these things are really interested in these things.
yeah, it's kind of like a high society. There's a book, the author's name was Emma, but I don't remember her last name. She wrote a book about high society and she like made the official rules for high
Yes,
society.
yes, I know what you're talking about. I don't typically use the term high society just because I think it has some sort of connotation of
Yeah.
like being elitist or like leaving
Mm,
people out. And so I try not to focus in that sort of way, but there is certainly something to be said for having some traditions and showing respect in traditional ways.
you early on said something about, putting the fork in the right place. Like that's high societies, like
Yes.
being very, very strict on those rules with how they dress and what they wear and where they place things, where you're more teaching like how to be properly etiquette in a respectful way, no matter where you're going.
Yes, and I'll certainly teach you, like, if you want to know what to wear to a white tie event or
Yeah.
like what to do with like a, endless course meal with all these courses, I'm happy to teach you all of those things. But the point is not to make other people feel left out or to draw attention if anyone feels uncomfortable or doesn't know what they're doing when they're navigating a place setting. That's the kind of thing that I don't sort of love about some of the perceptions
Yeah.
about society.
So you mentioned someone, let's say there's someone that has anxiety about being in conversation or going out to an expensive restaurant to eat and they have anxiety around that. Can you walk us through what you would teach someone if this is something that they want to learn?
I often start from where do these limiting beliefs begin and why does someone feel like they can't talk about themselves or they don't want to answer a question? Because oftentimes there's some deep rooted self worth things that need to be worked on. So it's like you belong at this event, you were invited to this interview for a reason. This person wants to go on a date with you, they want to hear more about you. So it's kind of unpacking a little bit of that. And then it's practice. It is
Mm,
just iteration. And I like to think of like everything is a rehearsal. There's no final exam. We are just always improving. So every opportunity that you have in a social interaction, it's an opportunity to get more comfortable. And I also recommend practicing in low stake scenarios. So, what I mean by that is that, like, let's say you're going home for Thanksgiving and you haven't seen your family in a really long time. That's maybe not the moment to try out your new communication style. Instead, I recommend practicing at a coffee shop or where you don't really know that many people, or when you're on a plane talking to a stranger. Like maybe you're trying to like some people have a habit of when they're speaking, even if they're using declarative sentences that end with a period, they speak as though they're asking a question and they don't really sound very intelligent because they have that inflection that's going up. Practice speaking in this more or authoritative, confident way with people who don't know you so well. So they're not going to notice the distinction and the difference that you're working.
mm.
And then you can build your confidence in these low stakes scenarios. And then you can start to incorporate these new ways of being when you are around your friends and around your family who know you better.
I love that. I didn't even think about that in terms of, some people speaking and it's like it's a period, but they're saying it as if it was a question.
Yes, it's very common, especially, I don't mean to be hard on women, but it is more common among women. And you can be whip smart, but if you are speaking in a way that undermines your authority, it can undermine the ability to get your ideas across.
Mm, I love that. It was something that I learned English in school, but that was not my first language. So for me, English was more confusing. Like I could speak it, but properly was a different scenario. Like I after I left, I was 19 and I just remember those first few years, I realized that I had a lot to learn, even just in how to speak in the English world. And so what I decided to do was I didn't read any books on it, but what I did is I paid a lot of attention to how people spoke that did not grow up in the Amish community. And then I would
Mm.
align myself with them. And then I just continued to learn. I did, and I still do read a lot of books, and I continue to learn things. But the thing that I have learned along the way is like it's not about sounding smart by using big words or anything like that. It's how clearly are you speaking with the words that you are using.
Exactly. The goal of communication is to be understood. If you
Mhm.
sound smart in the process, great. But if you're not understood, what's the point?
Yeah, there's an app that I recently downloaded, and it lets you play each day on your language and your writing and your vocabulary, and it teaches you different words to use and how to shorten your sentences to get your point across in a shorter sentence. It's really cool.
That's great. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I'll let you know what it is.
Oh.
So, what do you like? I know, do you have courses?
So I don't currently have a course online, but what I do is I teach classes to clients. So I have a lot of corporate clients, and then I teach one-on-one coaching online and in person.
Okay. So walk me through what that would look like. Like someone just comes to you and says, "Hey, one-on-one, I want to work with you." What would that look like?
Yeah, so everyone comes to me with different goals. But for example, I have one client right now who was just let go as part of a large separation. And so she's figuring out her next steps. And so we're working on her personal brand and identifying organizations that she might want to work with. And I'm helping her navigate the professional etiquette of networking and doing a lot of mock interviewing, that kind of thing. I work with a lot of wedding professionals who want to make sure that they know all of the wedding etiquette that they need to know if they're, say, a wedding planner, wedding photographer, things like that. And I work with people who are just looking to level up their, whether it's social graces, entertaining, hospitality in their home or in a social setting, or also in a professional setting. So lots of executive presence, communication, media training, things like that.
I love that. I just had a thought. Like, so there's a lot of people that have been in abusive relationships. So what would you suggest for someone that was in an abusive relationship, or maybe their partner was narcissistic and it really brought down their self-confidence? What would you say to someone that wants to build that confidence back up? Because the thing that comes to mind for me with
Yeah.
etiquette and knowing these things is it's also a self-confidence thing in how you
It
carry yourself.
It definitely is. And I would say you need to be your own biggest cheerleader and advocate and get whatever support you need in order to be kind to yourself. None of this is going to work if you're not kind to yourself. So I would start there and just grow in confidence and in independence every day. But I would really begin with like being gentle and kind with yourself. You've gone through a rough season. No one deserves this. Be proud of yourself for making the transition into a healthier season and look forward with the benefit of all that you've learned. But know that you can do this and that etiquette and self confidence and like your glow up, if you will, is a lot
Yeah,
about just like believing in yourself and taking little steps every day.
I love that. And someone that is still in a relationship where things are difficult and they feel like they don't have a voice, how does that person start to create those boundaries and, stand up for themselves and get their voice back?
I would say reminding yourself that you deserve better. No one deserves to be in a relationship that's unhealthy and that's abusive. And so know that you deserve better and that you deserve support in making that a reality. You don't need to do it alone.
I think that the thing there is it can be with any kind of relationship. It could be like whether it's a significant other, your mother, your sisters, your brothers, like it could be literally anybody in your life that because I can think back to past relationships that I've had with just friends that I had to put like boundaries in place because I realized like I was letting that person walk all over me.
Once you get to know a little bit more about etiquette, you will realize when people are trying to manipulate you, and you
Mhm.
won't be vulnerable to that because you'll realize, like, well, that was an inappropriate question. I don't need to answer that. That was kind of nosy. It's okay to have boundaries, and boundaries are very healthy and they can help you preserve your peace and your confidence, even though in the beginning they are challenging, they feel awkward, but they're worth it.
Or being able to say, like, "I'm not comfortable answering that." Like, I think that's so underrated.
Definitely. If you're not comfortable answering that, or no, I'm not available. I so appreciate you including me or inviting me, but I'm not able to make it, or being able to just gracefully leave an event or anything like that. With time, it becomes easier.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that I tell people is like the yes and no should be a clear definitive. And I think that the more you get to know yourself and the more confident you become in yourself and your intuition as well, that those things become a lot more clear.
I agree.
Let's say for example, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. Let's say for example, someone invites you to a party and you already know that you can't go. Instead of saying maybe, in my opinion, it's just thank you so much for the invitation. I can't make it, and I don't have to have an entire explanation behind why I can't make it. Is that wrong? Is that
You're exactly right. And what the kind thing to do is to do exactly what you suggested. So lead with gratitude, respond as soon as you know, and let them know that you can't join. You can provide a reason if you want to, but if you do, I would keep it short and sweet.
yeah.
And what you don't want to do is people, they think that they're being kind by saying, maybe I'll make it or I'll try my best. But in actuality, for the person organizing things, clarity is more kind. They
Mm.
don't want a whole bunch of maybes as they're trying to figure out logistics for their event or whatever it is they're inviting you to. So you nailed it. That's exactly what I would do.
Yeah. Whenever I talk to a new person for a consultation, at the end of that, I offer them or tell them, like, hey, here's what it looks like for us to work together. One of the things that I tell every single person is it's either a yes or a no, and both are okay. You get to make that decision. I don't. And so, what that does, and I tell them, I'm like, it either feels really good and it's a heck yes, or it doesn't feel like it is what you want or need, and it's a no. And both are okay, but you need to be able to make that definitive decision on what it is that you know that you're needing.
That's beautiful.
Because I think that it's really, really important for people to feel like they get to make these decisions on their own versus someone trying to persuade them or tell them what they need. If someone tries to tell me like, no, this is what you need to do, I'll probably run away.
Oh, I hear you. And I think etiquette is so much about making potentially awkward situations less awkward or giving
Mhm.
you confidence to navigate something that might otherwise feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find?
So my business is called Elevate Etiquette. So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads, my website, all called Elevate
All the
Etiquette.
things.
As all the things. And then I have an email newsletter that goes out every weekend. And I really love connecting with people. I love DMing people, answering questions that come in through comments. And I always like to say, if anyone has a question, like a personal question that they don't feel comfortable sharing in like a public setting, like a comment or something like that, they're always welcome to DM.
I love that. Yeah, I'm so active in my DMs too. Like, if it's appropriate for me to answer it, I'm answering it. So, where would you tell people, like, if they said, hey, like, you obviously have your websites and all your social links, but where would you tell people to start? Like, where's the very first place for them to go if they're like, hey, I'm really interested in this? Where can they start?
I do complimentary 15-minute calls with folks that are just trying to figure out what they need. I have a modern manners masterclass, and we get a sense of what your priorities are, what your goals are, and then we can create a plan from there.
I love that. Well, we're going to have all your social links and everything in the show notes for everybody. And I just want to say once again, like, I love following you. Like, my favorite was during the holidays, like, all the stuff that you put out over the holidays. That was my favorite. I was like, this is so good. And you always have the best outfits. I love fashion. So, your
Mhm.
your outfits, I'm like, oh, That's good. I want to do that. So anyway, for anybody that's interested, like please go give her a follow and watch her stuff. I think that, like Allison said, it's not about being superior to anybody else, making yourself look better or feel better than anybody else. It's about yourself and like how you want to elevate yourself. And to me, that brings self-confidence, and you'll feel a lot more confident if you're looking for a new job interview or a relationship, like whatever it is. I know that this will help you. So guys, please go check out her links, follow her on social, ask her questions. Like she said in the DMs, she'll probably answer them for you. And is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience, Allison?
Just that I really appreciate your time. I love the work that you're doing here. This was a lot of fun. And I'll say I'm really grateful to our mutual friend, Meg, who connected us.
Yeah.
She's the best.
We got to give her a shout out. She's amazing. Yeah. I love that. All right. Well, thanks guys. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning into the Lizzie Ens Show. If you're ready to take the next step to transforming your health and life, visit www.undietyou.com for all my resources and to book your consultation today. Don't forget to subscribe and join me each week for more tips, inspiration, and conversations with phenomenal guests to help you feel your best. See you guys next week.